In the last JSP web application we created, we selected essentially all of the rows from a table in a database. Well, there might be instances where you want to select only certain rows, okay, from certain tables in a database. So that's what we're going to do in this JSP web application. This one's going to be a little more complex. It's actually going to have two JSP pages. The first one is going to contain a form where the user will be inputting a first name and a last name of an actor. That form is going to post that data to another JSP page. It's going to get the first name and the last name as request parameters, and then it's going to execute a query against 3 tables in the Sequila database to retrieve all of the films that that particular actor has acted in. So a couple different things we're going to be doing in this JSP web application. First of all, we're going to be having 2 JSP pages. One's going to be for user input only. It's going to contain a form. The other JSP page is going to be interacting with the database. It's going to be retrieving select rows from 3 different tables in that database, and then it's going to be processing the results of the select and displaying them in tabular fashion. Okay, so let's get started. Let's create a new JSP web application. I'm going to name it Select Specific Data. Okay, and there it is. We're going to add a JSP to it, which we're going to name Index. This is a JSP that's going to contain the form. Okay, I'm going to give the title and the heading 1 elements a descriptive name. And then I'm going to proceed to add the form to the JSP. So this form is going to be posting data to another JSP named display.jsp, and it's going to be named my form. The form is going to have 2 text inputs, one for a first name and another for a last name. It's going to have a reset button, a clear button, and a submit button. Okay, and that's the form. Okay, pretty basic form. We can compile it and run it right now if we want to, so we can take a look at it, what it looks like. Let's run it. It's not going to do anything yet because we haven't implemented the display.jsp to which it's going to post to. But we can input values, we can see what it looks like, we can clear the values. But like I said, if we try to submit this form, we're going to get an error because the JSP that we're submitting the data to hasn't been implemented yet. Okay, so let's go back into NetBeans and implement that display.jsp. And the display.jsp is going to contain all of the logic to interface with the database, connect to the database, set up the query, execute the query, etc. And while I'm thinking of it, why don't I add to the libraries folder of this JSP web application the MySQL connector Java jar file, because we're going to need it. Okay, and now I'm going to add my second JSP, which has to be named display. Okay, because that's what I specified in my form. The form would be posting data to a JSP named display.jsp. So that's what I have to name it. Okay. So now I have to do the database type setup to this form that I did in our previous JSP application. I have to import all the appropriate classes in the interfaces, and I have to force the MySQL driver to load. So I'm just going to go back to our previous JSP application. Excuse me. I'm going to copy and paste that code, okay, into the JSP application that we're working on right now. Okay, and I am going to change the title and the heading 1 elements of our display.jsp so that they're consistent with the index.jsp. Excuse me. Okay, now below the heading 1 element in the display.jsp, I'm going to be implementing another actor class. It's going to be very similar to the previous actor class that we implemented. So guess what? I'm going to copy and paste the code and then update it slightly. Okay. Here's the actor class that I previously implemented. Copy it. I'm going to paste it into this JSP. I do have to make some changes to it. I have to change the statement, okay, the select statement, and I also have to change the getActors method. Okay. So let's start off with the select statement first. I'm going to be updating that. Okay, so there's my select statement. I'm joining 3 tables, the actor table, the film actor, and the film table. I'm selecting the first name and the last name from the actor table, and I'm selecting the title from the film table, where the first name and the last name are actually placeholder values, right? And I'm eventually going to update those placeholders with the first name and the last name that are input on the form. Okay, but then I have some more join conditions where the actor in the actor table is equal to the actor ID in the film actor table, and where the film ID in the film actor table is equal to the film ID in the film table. Okay, so I have a different select statement. Okay, now I have these 2 placeholders that I have to populate values in, and that's what I'm going to do down in the getActors method. I mentioned before that we're going to be making some changes to this method as well. The first change we're going to be making is we're going to have it take 2 parameters. A first name, 2 string parameters, and a last name. And those parameters are going to be the values that we place in our placeholders. Okay? So before we execute the query, let's update those placeholders. Oops, let me do an edit, undo. Okay. And in the first placeholder, we're going to be populating the first parameter. And in the second placeholder, we're going to be populating the last parameter. Okay, and those are really the only updates I believe that are required in the actor class. Okay, so we have our actor class implemented. Now what we're going to do down below is we're going to implement some Java code that does a couple of things. First of all, it's going to create an object of that actor class, and it's going to call the getActors method. But before it does that, it has to get the first name and the last name from the form. Okay, so we're going to be getting the request parameters from the form for the first name and the last name, and we're going to be assigning them to strings. So let's first of all set up the strings for the first name and the last name. And then below that, we're going to get the request parameters that are sent from the form, and we're going to assign their values to these strings. We're not just going to flat out assign the values though. First, we're going to check to make sure that the request parameters aren't null. And if they're not equal to null, then we're going to assign them to our strings. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing for the last name. Okay, so once we have our first name and our last name populated with values, okay, then we can create an object of our actor, and we can call the get actors method. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create an object of our actor. And let's call the get actors method. And don't forget, it's going to return a result set, which I'm going to name actors. And we're going to pass the first name and the last name strings to that method. Okay. And it looks like I have a syntax error there, semicolon expected. That could be just another one of those weird. Let me compile the file and see if the error goes away. Yeah, it went away. I don't know why that happens, but sometimes when you're embedding Java code in a JSP, you get these unexplained red squiggly lines, and if you simply compile your code, then the error will go away. Okay, so now we've included a lot of Java code in this display.jsp, and hopefully everything is formatted correctly. Okay. We've connected to the database, we've prepared a select statement, we've executed the select statement, we have a result set, but we're not doing anything with the result set. So if we were to run, okay, our index.jsp again, hopefully we don't receive any errors. Okay, hopefully we don't receive any errors, but we're not going to see anything displayed in our display.jsp. Okay? So there's our display.jsp, but nothing is displayed. We don't have any errors, so that's good. Okay, but nothing's being displayed, so we have to care for that. We'll go back into NetBeans, and in our display.jsp, down below, okay, our Java code, we're going to display what's in our result set, what's in our actors result set. We're going to display it in tabular fashion, so I'm going to drag a table over. The table is going to have 2 rows, it's going to have 3 columns, and it is going to have a border. Okay. And what we're going to be displaying in the table is the first name and the last name of the actor, along with the title of all of the films that the actor has acted in. Okay, now, don't forget, our result set is going to contain multiple records. So in our table, we want to generate as many rows as there are records in the result set. So before this last table row, what we're going to do is we're going to include some Java code. What we're going to do is we're going to include a while loop. And the condition of our while loop is while our actors result set has a next record, okay, then we're going to generate a table row. We're going to display some data in that table row too. At the end of the table row is where we're going to end our while loop. So we're going to have a single curly bracket, okay, below the table row. Seems kind of odd, but that's the way you have to set it up. Now, within each of the columns of that table row is where we're going to assign a specific value in each record of the result set, starting off with the actor first name. So we're going to reference our result set, and we're going to say get string, because the first name is a string, and the column that we're going to be getting is the first name column. And we're going to do that same thing in each of the columns for this table row, except we're not going to be getting the first name each time. We're going to get the last name, and then we're going to get the title. Okay, so let's compile the code again. Okay, and let's run the index.jsp. And let's test it out again. Now, hopefully this time, when we enter an actor name in our form, click on the submit button, in the display.jsp, we see a table that lists all the titles of all the films that this particular actor has acted in. And we see it. Okay, so there's our table. Now, the one thing I do want to do is I want to go back into NetBeans, particularly in our display.jsp, because I think it's important to understand this. Okay, this display.jsp, don't forget, it gets converted to a servlet. And here's the servlet code. Okay, there you can see our actor class, okay, in the servlet. If I scroll down a little bit further, there are all the out.write statements, okay, for the HTML that's going to be generated, okay, and here is the pure Java code that's embedded within the JSP, more out.write statements. Here's our Java code again, and more out.write statements for our table, okay, and the result, this servlet, when it gets executed, because don't forget, it's going to get executed by the servlet engine, okay. When it gets executed, its output is raw HTML, which is what we see right here. This is the output of the servlet, this raw HTML. You don't see any of the Java code in there. You don't see any of the JSP. All you see is static HTML, and that's the output of the servlet. This gets sent back to the browser, and the browser displays it in tabular fashion. Okay, so it's pretty interesting. We start out with a JSP that contains a combination of Java code, embedded Java code, and HTML. Then we have this servlet that has all of these out.write statements to generate the HTML, and it also has pure Java code embedded in there. It gets compiled, it gets executed, it generates static HTML, which we see right here, okay, that then gets rendered by the browser.